We are now live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Economic Development and Airport Committee meeting to order. Mr. Ivy and Ms. Earlston and Dr. Fellner are present. We have the approval of the September 15th regular meeting minutes to approve. If there are any corrections, let's speak now. If not, I need a motion to approve those.
I'll make a motion, Dr. Fellner, to approve the minutes.
Ms. Earlston makes the motion and Mr. Ivy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 3-0. Before us, we have the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? If not, I'd like an approval to, or a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion.
And I will second that.
Ms. Earlston makes the second, and all in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries, and the agenda is approved as presented. 3 discussion items, actually 1 discussion item, but 3 subsections. Mr. O'Leary, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to kind of lead us off into this briefly, and then we'll get on
Sure.
to Mr. Miller?
I'll try to. At the last several meetings of the Port Authority, the Port Board has been moving, I would just describe it as deliberately, but moving forward towards, I think, the big question about how and whether we build the Free Center. And I thought it was important to reconnect with the council committee or representatives of council. And so I think that's the number one purpose. There's been quite a bit of work done on the cost of the facility. I think the port's close to working out an agreement about who is likely to build the facility. It seems to me that it's important to update folks on the committee and then the council overall about that. So that's really what the idea was, the suggestion that the port representative of the port come and kind of outline where they're at and what the next steps are over the next weeks, months. So really that's about all the intro that I have.
Okay.
Chad can kind of proceed from that. I'm not sure who else is there from the Port Board, but anyways, that's what I've got, Doc, as far as an intro.
Okay, great. The first heading is the 2021 budget. So
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah.
No, the budget for the Port Authority, I'm assuming. So,
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that, since that's going to be the main focus of the council here to the end of the year. So,
Okay.
any
Sure.
comments on that?
It's funny. I don't see that agenda. I've
I'm
got
sorry.
that. That's in a different email. So I would simply say, I'm not sure if Gail's on tonight. I think we're a short distance away as far as the overall city budget, but I think it's the time, and I thought maybe Chad could have some comments on what the Port Authority expects from the city out of the 2021 budget in terms of support, subsidy, or whatever. So
Okay.
there's the intro on that one.
Right. Mr. Miller?
Okay, so I guess we'll start with the budget.
Let's
I'm
do
not sure if
some-
anyone else has had the opportunity to look at our budget. We revised it here recently because of the Wrenchville project that we're now part of. Obviously, we've got some expenditures on that, but we did send over the revised budget to the mayor for review. Basically, from a support perspective, not including anything that might happen with the potential freeze center, we would be looking for support in the amount of $75,000 from the city for our 2021 budget. I'd be happy to go in as much or as little detail as you'd like me to on there, answer any questions you have about the funds we currently have or what uses we've, I guess, spent money on during the current fiscal year. But it is about half of the request from last year. When we sat down and looked at our budget for next year, it's really similar to 2020's budget. We are moving forward. I guess the big expense item that'll be a little bit different for us this year is we are moving forward with the hiring of a contractor to serve as director for the port in a part-time capacity, but we do expect that to be a somewhat significant expense when you look at our overall operations. At this point in time, up until now, it's really been the board members that have been performing a lot of those duties. Obviously, we don't see that as an ideal situation. We really feel by bringing someone in with expertise in this area that we'll be able to move faster on more projects than what we're currently doing, because obviously we're all doing this in our free time, if you will. But we still have almost half, I'd say, of it just depends on where expenses go for the rest of the year on things like legal fees, but we have about half of the funds left from the amount that you appropriated to us last year. I think we've been very frugal with our spending, making sure that we're only spending money when it's appropriate for the furtherance of some type of project that we're doing. The biggest things that we've done this year, obviously, were to help with the COVID-19 loan response program. We really used the money from the program itself to cover a lot of those expenses. However, coming out of that program, there were some additional legal expenses as far as revising that agreement that we had to use some of the money on. We did use some of the monies from last year towards the Wrenchville project. Most of that money is coming from the unused portion of the COVID loan program, but there's about $15,000 that comes into play with things like surveying, engineering work, legal fees, property maintenance, those types of things that aren't really covered by the COVID money that we'll be putting towards that project. Yes, Tammy.
This might be a stupid question, but
Mhm.
can you tell me a little bit about the Wrenchville project?
Yes, so we have acquired an option to purchase the old Wrenchville property. That is going to be used for a housing development. We also have an option with a developer to purchase lots on that property to build. We are in the process of we're in the process of closing on the deal, but we're also in the process of partitioning a few lots off on Winchester for that developer to build. And I believe his intention is to start construction on 2 single-family homes within the next 4 to 5 months.
I knew there was a buyer for that. I just didn't know who that was. So
so there's a developer who was has a contract to purchase. He, I think, was a little bit uncomfortable with being I don't want to put words in his mouth, but maybe a long-term property owner in Gallion. He wants to be able to build some houses, but I'm not sure he wanted the whole property. So it just made sense for us to do that. Additionally, we can then control the development moving forward. He does have the option to purchase some lots from us, but we also have the option in the agreement where if there's another developer that comes in and says, hey, I want to develop this whole thing, we can sell them the rest of that land. So, but I mean, those are the types of things that we've done in addition, obviously, to the Free Center project. But I think that I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have about our 2021 budget and the request.
Mr. Miller, just to summarize briefly, I think, when we were talking about the budget last year, it coincided with the pandemic and one of our last in-person meetings discussed your actually having your budget, not allocating as much as we had initially promised. And then later on in the year, we renewed that to the full the full amount. I think that was closer to about 125 or 150.
It was 150. Yeah.
Okay. So you're asking for half of that for the 2021 budget currently? I mean, I think that's absolutely more than reasonable. Obviously, with the mayor and the auditor, and we're going to be hashing out specific numbers, but certainly that is, you know, you're to be congratulated for moving as I thought a banker would move in a fiduciary manner. So thanks a lot for that.
Well, just like you had mentioned, we didn't feel like, you know, one of the big expense items in there was an expense for a director or a contractor for the director position. And with everything that was going on, with the amount of work that we had as a board, we didn't really feel like it was probably prudent to do that last year, because like it or not, we could accomplish some of the administrative duties that really needed to be done with the board. But I think moving forward, if we're really going to accelerate and get, you know, some more things done, we're going to need somebody who is really devoted to those activities. It's
Exactly.
You know, Gary does a great job, Eric does a great job, Rod, everybody on the board does a great job participating and sort of divvying up the tasks. But you know, it's like the mayor has made the analogy. It could be kind of like the school board operating without a superintendent. It just really doesn't really work. So
Well, it's not in your guys' wheelhouse to do that. So you need to. That's another baseball analogy, I think. So I mean, that's again with the Wrenchville project. I think that's something that's a little more tangible that you guys have done. We're going to see some progress in the near future. So that's really encouraging as far as the purpose of the board, or excuse me, the purpose of the Port Authority and its function and its reason for being. So you know, I'm sure there's going to be other budgetary discussions upcoming in the near future, couple of weeks. So if nobody has any objections, I'm going to move on to the update on.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ivy.
Oh, I think Ms. Earlston, go ahead. You go first.
Okay, thank you. I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what you were saying, Dr. Mulder, that I think it's great that we're moving in that direction with the, you know, 75,000 as opposed to the 150,000. And I just had one question about that. Does that 75,000 include the hiring of that additional person?
it does.
So that's great. And then, you know, long term, we're looking at you guys becoming, you know, fiscally responsible on your own. And you know, that we're heading, fortunately, it looks like we're heading in that direction, you know, so I think that's all positive. So thank you.
Thank you.
My only question would be, kind of piggybacking off Tammy, is that you're only requesting 75,000. This might throw some of you for a loop. You've standard this in the past, it's 150,000 and you're requesting only half. Is that actually going to put a damper or hamper, or is that going to have an adverse effect on what you could possibly do or for the 2021 year? I know that's kind of odd, but are you sure you're asking for enough?
So, you know, here's, I guess, my thoughts on that. You know, I'm not sure that this will be the only request that we make of council.
Okay.
We don't have any specific projects that, other than what I've already outlined, that we're going to be pursuing right now. That doesn't mean something doesn't pop up tomorrow. That means something doesn't pop up in January. Similar to what the COVID situation did with the loan program, with the Wrenchville opportunity. So I think, you know, given we don't have our own sources of revenue right now, I do think it's prudent for us to take the approach that we're taking to ask for enough money to function, basically, what we think we're going to need to operate, but to operate with the understanding that we're still going to need to work with council on a regular basis, if other opportunities arise, to ask for additional funds if they're needed, and sort of make the case on a case-by-case basis for those projects, so that you can make a determination at that point in time as to whether or not you feel those additional funds are warranted. I think it gives you keeps the lines of communication open between the two groups, and I think it gives you guys the opportunity to make sure that what we're pursuing is of benefit to the city.
All right, thank
Hey,
you. That's
Doc,
that's very
can I jump-
sufficient.
I'm sorry, Aaron.
That's okay.
Let me jump in real quickly. What a good example on that Wrenchville property, just to stay on that and how it may change the overall budget need. One of the things that a part-time, let's use that term, director will be able to work on is spending the hours trying to acquire the former Elliott machine or the Monaco property. I think anybody who's been out there and is familiar with that realizes that's a real limitation on the remarketing.
I have to agree with you on that. I was kind of wondering about that, Mr. Leary, that would definitely hamper marketing out there, especially when you're talking about the kind of homes you want to build and stuff. That would be definitely a
Absolutely.
drawback. So
What Chad's talking about and what the board's been working on with the developer who's invested a lot in Galleon. So I have confidence that he'll do that. Our house is mostly on the north end of that property. Without trying to describe it without a map, it would be frontage on Winchester Road. I think overall for that whole parcel that the port's acquired, we're going to have to get that old block building out of there.
I'm happy to hear you say that. That's
that is a piece of what may, Chad didn't mention that, but that's an example of later this year, maybe next year, where efforts to acquire it or some sort of negotiation, certainly demolition costs, those would be things that I think realistically the port will come back to the city and say, okay, this is how much we expect to demo it. And at that point, I'd have to guess in 22 or 3, maybe not that far into the future, but let's say in 2022, there'd be additional money. But I'd be real happy, and I'm sure the port board would, if we identified the owner, transacted, an acceptable price, we're able to acquire that. That would be the kind of thing that I expect the port would come back to council and say, for X amount, we can acquire the property. So without getting into too much detail, that would be an example where they would come back sometime in 21 and need a little bit more money. But I think the 75, given the fund balances that they have, will, and allow them to hire a real competent, knowledgeable director to do the day-to-day operations. Thanks.
Are there any other questions, comments? If not, I'm going to move on to the next subsection, which is a little update on the Free Center.
Okay, so to give you guys an idea of where we're at, we have moved through our criteria architect process that involved our RFQ and RFPs, which is request for proposals or qualifications and request for proposals. So the port hired a criteria architect to basically create I don't know, I guess a design. It's not a super detailed design, but a design that would give builders and design firms the opportunity to put together a bid package for us, so that we could compare different firms, their costs and their approaches and the like. So through that, we actually received, I believe, 12 sets of qualifications from contractors and design teams that were really scattered all over Ohio. We narrowed that 12 down to 4, where we actually asked for proposals from them. So they presented their ideas to us, actually gave us some firm numbers on paper, sort of talked to us about their qualifications, what they've done in the past, how they would approach this project. And from that, we have narrowed that down to what our first choice is from a contractor design team. And we're at the point in time now where we are starting discussions with that firm to sort of hone in on our design criteria and try to really come up with a ultimate price, if you will, or maximum price for the project, and kind of, at the same time, we have to really start focusing on, if this is something that we want to pursue as a community, how we're going to pay for it. So really kind of merging both of those streams together right now to see if this is something that we would like to do and is feasible. And we thought it was important to kind of bring you guys up to date on the process, where we're at, see if you have any questions. But also, we would love, if it's from this committee or from council as whole, a couple of volunteers from council to work with the port as far as sort of a working group where we can have, constant communication as we move forward, because obviously we will need council support in order to get this project done. Without council support, it probably won't happen. But we would love to involve as members of council with us on this journey as we sort of, the next 30 to 60 days, really hammer out all the details and find the path to get this project completed if it's something we're going to do or start in 2021.
Chad, do you have in-person meetings, or is it through Zoom, virtual? How are you guys meeting?
We do hybrid. So most of us meet in person, but we also have Zoom set up for anybody who would prefer.
Well,
You can't see everybody because
sure.
I don't have that cool of technology, but you can at least hear everybody.
I'm gonna just kind of jump the gun here and volunteer myself to be a little liaison. I don't know how the other, not only committee members but council members feel about that, but I think it's important. If you're right, we need an attachment from the Port Authority to council. I know the mayor is intimately involved, but I do think, so I'm in, Chad.
Okay.
Hey, I'll jump in if I might, Doc. You may just want to, this was a part of the discussion at the last port meeting, whether or not to just work through the Economic Development Committee, or if, as Chad said, try to get points of view outside of that group. So it really is your prerogative. The dollars and cents, the scope of the project. I was in getting ready for tonight thinking about the last meeting that you had within that committee. We had a great turnout. It was a real positive meeting in terms of moving forward. Since that time, the sort of general estimates have changed. And I think overall, the cost of the project has increased. And so without getting into any kind of discussion of all that detail, it really is important that as we build support, that we realize the cost of the project. So maybe there are questions tonight. I believe, although I had to leave the last meeting, I believe the port selected. City doesn't have a vote in this, and I just want to make that clear without, they've decided to hire a firm that had an estimate in and around 8.5 million. So those people watching before they fall off the chair, that's compared to the 3 others. Remember, Chad said there were 4 that there were detailed interviews. They ranged all the way up into the high 10, low $11 million range. So I think it's real important to come to grips with what the costs are. And I think that's part of the reason to reconnect with council is this is what it's going to cost. It does take out of focus, if you will, what we thought in terms of talking 4 or 5 months ago. There were scenarios run. I think committee members will remember, people have been involved on this for a while. We were thinking about a $5 million freeze fund commitment. And you remember whether it would be cash or borrowed or some portion of that. When you're looking at a project that is higher than or estimated at a higher cost than we thought, I think we're going to have to look at that, and that's where I believe Chad and the port want to get into the nitty gritty, if you will, and figure out how to accomplish the goal.
You're exactly right, and we also know that as time marches on, costs increase.
Yeah, well, that's true.
We need to either act on this or we need to make a decision, and I think council input, or at least that connection is going to be valuable, because the port, I believe, is everybody's doing this as a second career. No offense to you, Mayor, but we have the luxury of a little bit of time, and it's like, oh, we can wait another month, but I think we need to really get hold our own feet to the fire here.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another, if I might, one other point or two. That number is for the facility and the site prep of the facility. So there will be another part of this equation, or yet to be equation, probably is a better way of saying it, that have to do with off-site infrastructure. So in your mind's eye, if you imagine where the roadway ends, where water and sewer is currently the end of the line, all of those costs, have to be funded one way or another. So that's something else that will go into that equation that the city will likely, that'll be public infrastructure. My thoughts early on and at this point are that's the city is going to have to figure out how to fund that. And so that's another component, another reason to
Exactly.
Start more active coordination on what the scope is, and then how are we going to get there. So anyways, that's mostly what I have to say.
Mr. Miller, anything else?
I think Tammy has a question.
Yeah, Tammy keeps waving her hand.
Sorry.
She's about ready to do a flip.
I've got only the corner. There we go.
Oh, okay.
I can see everybody.
First off, I just want to thank you, Doug Felder, for stepping up to fill that role and go sit on that board with them. I really appreciate that. I would love to do it. But I did just take a job in Mansfield today. So until I figure out how that's going to work, I don't really want to bite off anything more than I can chew. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention and about this is, as I think many of us probably know, building right now is just through the roof. I mean, it's numbers we've never seen. So to build at this point in time is the numbers are going to be astronomical, as well as probably, like you said, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but something we're looking at right now could be totally different 3 months from now, better or worse. We don't know, but I'm not surprised that the amounts that we were looking at a while back have now changed. So I just kind of wanted to throw that
Thank you.
aspect out there.
Dr. Fellner, real quick,
Certainly.
a couple points that I wanted to bring up with the numbers that we were just talking about. If you recall, we're going through a process called design, build, bid, versus design, bid, build. So that's important to remember, because the step Chad's talking about is this value engineering that we still get to do. So we're at a number of around 8.5, but we get the chance, and I'll use the example, we need 23 fixtures in the bathrooms. And if there's two option A at 1,000 and option B at $700, the difference is quite a savings. And there may be no difference between the two fixtures other than a name, a brand cost. So that's the simplest form of value engineering. There's also value engineering on the site. Like, one of the decisions already made is to move the building location because it has substantial impact on the foundation costs. That one's pretty much moving in a direction already, but we have an opportunity to bring that cost down some. As much as you would think costs are escalated, Tammy, actually in the conversation with those 13 contractors that initially came in, the commercial market isn't as swamped as the residential right now. And this being a metal building versus lumber, lumber was in high demand with prices escalating very quickly in the fall. Those are starting to come down a little bit. I actually was out to meet with Mr. Giltz last week, and he even made the comment that there's been 2 decreases of 6% over the last 2 weeks. So that may stabilize a little bit. The construction market for commercial is actually favorable. A lot of contractors are looking for work. So that has kind of helped us a little bit. So I'm actually encouraged where we are and where I think we can get to. And I appreciate Dr. Fellner stepping up, because I think that would be valuable having your input.
Can I ask then, what has caused the change? If things are favorable and they're actually going down in price, what has caused the price to go up?
Square footage went up. With the criteria architect getting involved, we added, I think it was about, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 15% of square footage increase because of requirements of ceiling heights for volleyball and basketball. So that's really what did it.
Thank you.
Hey, Doc, let me add one thing to what Gary was saying, if I might, that the cost of the architect is, if you will, embedded in that $8-point-something million soon to be, if it can be funded, negotiated cost. So in a situation where you had an architect, they would pay you, or excuse me, charge you 9%, roughly 9 or 10% for a design fee on that
Total price.
$10 million building or $8 million building. So the one of the things that is the approach that the port has taken with this design build and criteria architect and those things that are a little bit foreign to public works funding and design, I think will save us a few $100,000 at least. You can look into the quote by the contractor that was selected, and there's a fee for that architecture firm and their contribution to it. And help me on this, Gary. You may even have it in front of you. I think it was in the high 200,000s. Less than 300,000 is the design feature of this building that's $7 million plus. So that's when you do the percentage, that's a relatively low percentage cost for the design.
Right, that's going on 50% less.
Yeah, is that right, Gary? Roughly?
Yeah, it was 267,968 to be exact.
Yeah, there I am exaggerating. So it's 265 or 270 of whatever the number of the estimated cost of the materials. It's a smart way to get that architecture fee. Get what's required to have the necessary design. I think it's I think that was probably one of the strengths of the proposal of the firm that the port selected. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. We would probably have paid close to twice that much if we'd used the traditional design, bid, build kind of public works setup. So
We got some questions coming in and some statements coming in on the Facebook. We got something from Heath here. He said, thank you, Council, Dr. Fellner, Ms. Earlston, and Mr. Ivy. Appreciate your leadership to look deep into this opportunity for our community. And then we have Josh that wants to know what firm will be used. And then we have Sierra says, any way we can look into local firms and or trades to help out with the costs. And then Heath did remark it is a local firm that would use Fox Plumbing and Carter Electric, great contract for local galleon companies. So that's what's on there right now. So I don't know if anybody wants to address any of that.
I can address some of those questions since I probably would have, or the port would have more of those answers.
Yeah.
But the firm that we have selected is J&F Construction. So while they're not galleon, they are local. They're in Bucyrus. They were the most local firm that bid in the project, and I know that they have taken great care to already source a lot of the labor and contract work out to local companies. So a couple of the names mentioned, I believe, have already provided bids to J&F for some of the work. Fox Plumbing, Carter Electric, both companies in town. That is one of the reasons we believe that their cost to bring this project to fruition was a lot lower than the other competitors. Additionally, J&F being closer has lower mobilization costs. They also self-perform a lot more of their own work. They gave us an estimate in the 35% range, where some of the firms we were talking to, they don't do any of their own work. They just subcontract it all out. So,
They don't
I've
care.
been in that situation before where I feel like I'm paying 5 different people to do the same thing. That saves you some money there. So.
Good. Julie, anything else?
I have a question, please.
Certainly.
Kind of just a scenario with just only 2 options. We either go forward with it or we don't. So just for this question's purpose, let's assume that we do. Regardless of how we request, whether it's 5 million or 6 million, I know there's going to be a lot of money that's probably going to need to be raised. And I was just wondering if Mr. Miller or Mr. Frankhouse would like to comment. Obviously, the costs, as we discussed, could be going up. Where do you guys feel we are now with the work you've done as far as securing finances outside the freeze request that could be coming up? How much more do you have to go? Could you just give us a brief summary on where we're at with that right now?
You want me to speak to that, Chad?
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you remember, we've had discussion, there's 1.2 million that's been raised currently, 200,000 from the Timken Foundation, 500,000 from the state capital bill. There was 500,000 from the Community Foundation for Crawford County. And so that's the 1.2. There's 100,000 that's in waiting for a decision as it relates to city's commitment. which would bring us to 1.3. I think there's $1 million of sponsorship. If some of you haven't seen it, there is a animation out there of the Free Center that was done by our criteria architect. It's fabulous. In that animation, it shows the sponsorships on the hard court side and on the turf side, which are $1 million worth of sponsorship. I've done some calculations as it relates to the healthcare industry. It's projected that a healthcare provider associated with this facility is going to see somewhere between 12 to 15% of the occupants. You may have heard me say in the past that we anticipate 25,000 visitors. Well, that's 2 parents and a kid. So let's just call it 8,000 spectators. And the average price of medical treatment when they see 10 to 12% over 10 years is about $5 to $6 million of revenue for a healthcare provider. So to warrant a $500,000 sponsorship for 7 to 10 years with signage on the walls and in the flooring is valid. It's reasonable to get that. So we've got $1 million in sponsorship, and then I think there's $1 million that is going to be raised from maybe jurisdictional support in our community outside of just the city that I think is warranted because of the sales tax produced. The sales tax alone, I just did an analysis of Erie County, and they increased their sales tax 4.36% between 19 and 18 based on Sports Force opening up. And I think we can expect that same increase. So that generally warrants about a $200,000 increase almost per year in sales tax in this county. So I think that's a discussion that needs to be had on the county level, and we tend to do that. So, I mean, if you look at that, we've got, if this could be 6 million here, you've got 1.2 already raised. We're at 7.2, $1 million in sponsorship is 8.2, and another $1 million, we're at 9.2. So we're in good shape. This can happen, but it's going to take, us all believing that it's a different way of growing our community. It's definitely somewhere between 1.9 and 2.9 million dollars of economic impact annually, just in the first 5 years. That's before we even start growing. So I think it provides a wonderful opportunity to our community with property tax growth, income tax growth, sales tax growth. It really makes a lot of sense.
I have just Dr. Fellner, if I could ask one more question. Just assuming that we decide to proceed, Gary, sounds like there's quite a bit of money that you could potentially raise out there. Do you feel it'd be beneficial if council were to possibly come up with some type of resolution that we could provide to you in the port, guaranteeing the security and the request of the 5 to 6 million freeze request, if you're able to raise the rest of the funds that you need? If you had something like that, would that make your job a little bit easier when you're trying to raise the funds?
Well, one of the things we did is we went through this whole criteria architect design build process just to ensure the best cost. I think getting that support is going to be critical. I mean, we're fortunate to have gotten Timken and the Community Foundation and the state. So I think when the community, the city of Galleon, is committed to it, I mean, that's just going to give us added support. I mean, that's probably 70% of the project. So, I mean, it helps us. It strengthens our proposition when we're out there talking to whoever it might be in that donor position or from a countywide standpoint.
That's
Hey, could I ask some questions? This is going to sound like Debbie Downer, Doc, but here I go. May I?
Well, take a deep breath first.
Oh, yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
Smile. Go ahead. Ask your questions.
Of the state money, how much of that do you expect to be drawn down prior to negotiating that contract with JNF? So how much will be left, if you will?
Chad, can you comment on how much?
Yeah, give me a second there, Mr. Mayor. It's actually in that budget. So
The point is,
we would expect to have about $225,000 that's not drawn, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. So there, of the 500,000, when you go through that list of funds raised, there have been some relatively large drawdowns on that. I mean,
Yes, yeah.
I really don't want to see, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, Doc. I'm a real advocate of this, but there are some costs in there. And I think we need to, at times, slow down and divide out those costs. So the second point that I would want to make is that 8 million or 8.5 million that has some of the money raised for that, okay? It does not include what will likely fall on the shoulders of the city, and that's roughly $1.5 million worth of off-site infrastructure. So if you think in your mind's eye from where the location of the facility back to Valero to the east, the water, sewer, stormwater, roadway, electric, those costs, city costs, are not part of that $8.5 million number. So in terms of council, you know, we're gonna have to figure out how to fund that. I spent a fair amount of time, and without getting ahead of ourselves, parking is a pretty effective cost raiser, or excuse me, revenue raiser that could cover some of those costs of those infrastructure dollars. But yeah, you're going to have, I know it may seem like a lot to some, and we can debate it, discuss it, engineering, but for a planning number, I would think $1.5 million for the city infrastructure. And then, you know, certainly you're going to have to get natural gas back there. So whatever that number is, maybe $1.5 million is a little heavy on the scale, but I think, like I said a second ago, it's a good planning number. So, you know, as we move forward, you have the freeze dollars and how we fund that and how other money comes to the table that Gary explained. But then we have, the city has to think through how to come up with another $1.5 million for the infrastructure. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion, not as a negative. I'm not against it, but it's a real challenge. I literally think about it almost every day. How are we going to raise that money to do that part? Because the project itself is getting, you know, in the $8.5 million range. It's a lot more than once upon a time we'd imagined. So, but this isn't imaginary. There's a lot of work been put in. I think the last thing I'd say, Doc, is, you know, if we can develop a community consensus, I think that's a real important thing. I had mentioned last night in my, I think maybe 10 people were watching. I say that tongue in cheek, but on my live stream, about those supporters, whether it's city council and or the port board members, solicit endorsements from organizations like the chamber, the school board. It was good to hear Gary talking about trying to get some revenue from other jurisdictional folks, whether that's the county commissioners in code or whether it's potentially school districts that could provide some financial support. I think all of those things are you know, we start to get into that sort of discussion in terms of how to raise that money. So anyways, I know it seems like it's been a long time and there's been a lot of work done, but quite honestly, the hard work will start now if we want to move ahead. And so those issues of how to raise the funds, how to capture the income. Doc, I'm really bad at this. Everyone knows this. One thing that, not to challenge you, Gary, but to say, when you look at Erie County, one of the things about the commercial benefits of this facility, I want to build it, but I don't want to promote what the business benefits will be. Erie County, if you know the sports force, all of the places you'd eat or stay overnight are in Erie County. And I think what we'll see initially, and one of our challenges to make this a smart move in terms of business development, is to make sure that all of our out-of-town business, all of our overnight stays don't end up over in Richland County, and that we begin to do some things to try to capture that. So that's another discussion, Doc, for another night. But I think Erie County is a little bit different because folks aren't, for instance, driving to Norwalk to stay overnight to drive back up there. A lot of that travel and tourism ends up staying there in Erie County. So, one of my worries is that we'll build this and all that business development ends up in Ontario. So I'll continue to be persistent about doing things to make sure that we maximize that commercial benefit at the facility or on the site. So,
As you
Yep.
should be.
Tammy has her hand up or keeps trying to.
I just wanted to comment on what the mayor was saying. I don't think that's negative at all. And I don't think that, I think that our job as a council is to look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and see all sides of everything, and not just, barrel forward without looking at pros, cons, and everything involved. So I think that's great that we, keep these things in mind and discuss them. And, that's our job to look at that everything. So I appreciate all the comments.
Yes, absolutely.
And not, I'm not trying to, again, like, that's not, I don't feel like that's being negative. I think that's just being very realistic and thorough and doing our job. So I just wanted to make that comment.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Tom, you did very well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not to get into this too much more, but I'm an early advocate of this. I've seen the gap. I've seen what not having that development, that opportunity for youth sports. I'll continue. This sounds like a campaign speech. It's not meant to be. We got to make sure that this gets used extensively by local kids. And if Galleon City is going to pay most of the bills, then that's Galleon kids first, if you will. I think more, if you will, regionally, it'd be really, when Crestline Elementary volleyballers or basketballers or soccer kids are using that, I think all of us who have been trying to bring this, into reality, actually build the thing, will feel real good about that. So I think I'll continue to be a pain in the neck about this not becoming a commercial travel ball facility. That if you were to look at all the hours, that you would see that there is as much involvement by Galleon kids, Crawford County kids, neighboring communities kids, is there is for that commercial travel sports world. So anyways, I think we can capture both, but I think we're gonna, we'll have to keep working on that. So.
Chad, anything else before we wrap it up?
I'll try one more thing if I might. I think in the comments it was good to get those comments. One of the things that happened at the last Port Authority meeting is that a board member mentioned some of the feedback they're getting from the community. And I recommended, quite honestly, that we have this initial discussion so that people who have questions, quite honestly, people who think this might be the worst idea they've ever heard, because you'll hear that. I mean, Doc, you may hear that in your day job, that point of view gets a chance to ask their questions and get them answered. So back to what Tammy said, I'm in favor of getting this done, but I think it is important, given that some community members, some community leaders have approached individual Port Authority board members with some misgivings, some, I think probably in the long run, misunderstandings. But I'm very determined to get a pretty thorough discussion before we spend $10 million on something that doesn't have that obvious community consensus. So I know people say just plow ahead, but I think that, you know, over the 5-10 year period that we'll feel better about it if we've spent a little time developing that consensus. So thanks for that, allowing me to go ahead and say that as well.
Sure. Any other comments? I think, Dad, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so since I've extended my neck out to the guillotine a little bit for you, when's our next meeting?
Well, the next port board meeting's on December 8th. So,
9:30 a.m.
yeah, 9:30 a.m. though. That might be rough there.
What is December 8th?
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. It's the day of council.
Okay,
I do go there. I go to every meeting and I do record. So
okay. Well, let me look tomorrow at the schedule, and I'll get back with you with more details on how to attend.
And there's also potential that we might be having a conference or a meeting with the contractor that day too,
Okay.
Dr. Fellner. So that might be even the better time for you to participate with this discussion.
Right.
Because as of right now, as far as agenda items go for that meeting, I'm not sure what what we're going to have from Free Center for that.
Sure.
Yes,
Well,
Julie?
I can numb up a patient and come talk to you guys. We'll make it work.
I have Eric came on and he had a comment. Any consideration to a design, build, operate format where the operator of the facility oversees the project design and build, as well as makes a substantial financial investment to the project, knowing they will garner a return over the contract term of operation. That was Eric Weber. So if that
Gotcha.
anyway, so,
Well, Gary stepped away. He'd probably been the better person to answer this
right.
question. I can tell you that in the early stages of this project, there was a I don't even know what they would call themselves, but a sports recreation firm that was contracted to provide us with a pro forma, which is just a statement of what they feel like revenues, expenses, things like that to operate the facility are going to be. I personally am unaware of any firms that would take an ownership stake in the project themselves. What we have found so far is that there are lots of firms similar to the firm that we had used that would be more than willing to charge you fees to operate the facility for you, but and kind of take their piece of the revenue in that way, but not that have expressed any type of interest in actually owning or operating the facility.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick on that. Up in Sandusky, I think it's a useful, but it's not an identical twin, if you'll accept that kind of busted analogy. It's a useful analogy, but it's not identical. The big money of sports complexes invested a share of that money in Sandusky. Just as Chad said, that firm in their overall review of this pro forma really didn't express an interest in helping capitalize that. So if I understood Eric's question, there is no one out there, but I would say that as we're trying to figure out how we raise that money, I don't think, Gary's explanation of how you would go out raising money for sponsorship, that in no way precludes that if there was somebody who wanted to take a minority share, invest in it. You see Chad shaking his head. Yeah, heck yes, they'd be happy to talk to him. So it's a neat idea. We have not beaten the bushes to death, but we have inquired a lot over the years about a local investor who could, let's say have a 20-25% share in it, and then either share in, if you will, the profits or get their investment back. So I think if I understood the question, I think it's a good one. And Chad's saying, yeah, we'll definitely look at that if somebody were to pop up and say, yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. And so I hope that answers it, Julie. Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, he
Any,
didn't say anything else, so.
any other comments? I think we've got plenty on the table to think about. Ms. Earlston, Mr. Ivy.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. So, any other business? If not, Julie, when would be, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
She's going to adjourn.
No, we have to set the next meeting first.
It's right now it's scheduled for December 15th.
December 15th on Zoom. You heard it here first, 7 o'clock. Now, Mrs. Earlston.
My battery's getting ready to die on my computer. I don't have a charger. So I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Very good. Mrs.
Second.
Earlston, makes the motion and Mr. Ivy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. 8:03.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.
Good night.